Good day, folks, and welcome back to another installment of Old War Stories with Uncle Jay. You can see that I have Lion here. He's going to help tell the story and hit me with his tail so I remember stuff, I guess. Unfortunately, it's another bright sunny day outside, cold out, but whatever. So there's light coming in, and the Sun King will be here. And this is the best I can do as far as lights. I can't even tell you how bright this ring light is. That is just horrible on my eyes. But anyway, this one is entitled, My Foot's Getting Knotted Up. Now this dates back, I had to be 8 or 9. So we'll say around 1987 or so. Not sure exactly. Could have been 86, might have been 88, I don't really know. And those words were spoken by my grandmother. At this point, was it 4 years ago now, I think, that she passed? So it was in November, about 4 years ago, that she passed. So it's a little past due as far as this old war story, but this is now when I'm getting to record some. So anyways, about 1987 or so, my grandmother, when I was a kid, and of course my sister was a kid, my grandmother lived in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, and she would take the train from there out every Friday to where we lived on Long Island, and she would take care of us kids, my sister and I. It's not like my mother actually did anything during the week. She did in the beginning actually cook dinner, usually, pretty much for the most part, all the time. But Grandma would come on the weekends and stuff like that, and we would get groceries. We would go out to the grocery store as soon as my sister and I got home from school on Friday. We'd all go to the grocery store and then usually to a restaurant and that was it. And then we'd get back home, and my mother was functional. She would do the laundry every week on Friday. She'd vacuum the house every week on Friday. It was amazing. Yeah, she actually did stuff. She didn't have Grandma vacuum or really do the laundry. She'd have Grandma put the laundry in the dryer occasionally, but other than that, Grandma was there really for my sister and I. And we had this little regiment. Now, we were young kids, and I don't remember if the date is even correct. It could have even been before that. It might have been as soon as 1984, 85. But Grandma was always out on the weekend and that. And one random Friday, out of nowhere, we had this regimen where the laundry would go on. My mother would vacuum, which sometimes was she'd plug the vacuum into the same circuit as the washing machine and blow it. So that was an interesting one. My father worked for IBM in New York City, and he was there, and he worked the evening shift from like 4 o'clock on. So he was usually gone about by the time I got home from school. Soon after, and then we would go out to the grocery store in that. Somewhere around, I had 7, 8 o'clock, maybe not even 8 o'clock because I was still kind of young, Grandma would give us a bath. Now, when we were really, really young, we'd be in the bathtub together because I'm 3, she's 4, nobody knows anything of what's, and that's just the thing that parents will do when there's 2 kids and they're too young to understand the differences between and look at each other's parts and things and whatnot. But, later on we were bathed separately. And Grandma would give us a bath, and then she'd make us a grilled cheese sandwich with Nestle's Quick. And that could be the strawberry or the chocolate variety, because those were the 2 that were out then. And that came in a metal canister with a metal top that was a friction fit, and you'd use the spoon to pop the thing out, and then you get a couple spoons, put it in the milk and that, and she'd make the best goddamn grilled cheese sandwiches in the world. I don't know what it is. Never, ever, ever been duplicated by anyone anywhere. I will never, ever forget that. So I wanted to get the night going, and I remember I was in the kitchen, and I was all ready for a bath, and I said, "Come on, Graham, let's go, let's go." And she said, "Oh, I just a minute." And she was kind of hesitant for some reason. She wasn't feeling well, but it wasn't this big thing at the moment. And then she said, "Hang on, let me sit down. My foot's getting knotted up." I get it, but I still don't get exactly what that meant. And she was 60, late 60s at the time, to pushing early 70 maybe. And I remember she was there and she said, "My foot's getting knotted up." She sat down in the chair that was pulled out from the table there, and she sat sideways. In other words, I'm sitting in the chair properly, but if I turned sideways, so she was sitting, and there were no arms on it, so you could sit sideways on the chair. She sat there and went to like reach down to her ankle. And I saw this happen. I have the video in my mind playing back. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she fell backwards and took the chair down with it. The next thing you heard was, "Graham? Graham? Graham?" Grandma passed out. And my sister and I were too young to really understand what this meant and what it was. Not to worry, this story has a happy ending, of course, because like I said, she lived on from 60, whatever she was, to 98 years old. So obviously this was rectified, but there were a couple of things that I will remember always about that. The household now goes into emergency mode. My mother calls 911. Yes, through a rotary phone, thank you. And that is the Northern Telecom, Northern Electric, Northern something that I have in my laundry room right now. That used to be the old kitchen phone, and the very phone she dialed 911 from back in the day. She said, "My mother passed out and this, that, and the third," and the paramedics came and she was taken away in an ambulance. And my sister and I are very scared. We don't know what's going on or why any of this is happening or why did anything bad happen to Grandma. Grandma was the sweetest old lady, like what's going on. It was a heart condition. And I don't remember what actually she got done in the hospital, but she woke up from passing out and went to the hospital and was treated and released. But in the meantime, my dad was at work. Now, my mother is freaking the fuck out because this is her mother, and she had to go to the hospital with her to find out what's going on. So now we had a problem because we didn't have any babysitter per se, and my father is at work. Now, my father had a beeper. IBM gave him a beeper, and this went over a number of iterations over the years. They went from this thing which was sort of like a radio, and it was voice dispatched, where he had calls that he had to go to in the city. Or if there was a personal issue, they would beep that particular person and that. But I think it was just broadcasted to all with those. And then you would make a phone call and find out, more details and take the call or take care of whatever needed to be taken care of. The next iteration was the brick. The brick was a brick. It was literally this big, about an inch and change thick. It had a 2-line LCD character display, and I believe 22K of RAM. That's right, K for kilo, not M, not G, not T, none of that stuff. K. 22 kilobytes of memory, I think only of which 11 were available for user details, whatever contacts and you wanted to enter in and stuff. And it would send very cryptic messages on there, but in IBM speak, they all knew what it meant and where the things were, and they could respond using that. It had a transmitter in it that went over radio. I don't know what kind of radio. Cellular networks were not really set up for data and texting, so I guess IBM had their own setup in that. But the brick had, I believe, I could be mistaken on this, I believe it had a 1 watt transmitter in it. That is a tremendous amount of power to be holding in your hand that you're going to transmit. The radiation that came out of this thing, well, I'll tell you a story of the radiation that came out of this thing. My father would get ready for work, and we had redone the bathroom somewhere around that time, and he found out the hard way that taking his beeper into the bathroom so he could do the 3 S's, obviously, shit, shave, shower, so he could do those, bringing the beeper in was not a great idea. Did it fall in the tub? Did it fall in the toilet? Did it fall in the sink? No, the fucking thing was waterproof. It literally was waterproof up to like 3 feet. It had rubber plugs in the ports. It even had a fucking dial-up modem in there that dialed Rotary. That's right. It had a relay inside, and if you set it up just the right way, you could hear it go tick, 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 and it would actually pulse the line in that. And it had a modem port and a printer port for the elusive printer that nobody ever had. But the transmitter of this thing was 1 watt, and we had redone the bathroom. And we put in, because it's up high, a GFCI outlet. And he tried transmitting from the bathroom. It not only tripped the GFCI, it tripped the fucking circuit breaker. This was bad news, whatever this thing put out. But hey, for years he had the brick and that. And you could throw these things, drop these things. Oh man, they were indestructible. So he'd get messages, little cryptic text messages on there. But in order to get in touch with him, he would have to be beeped. Now, I'm going to leave out the last name. My dad's name is Jack. I've mentioned that many times before, so I'm just going to leave out the last name, and we'll just make it K, like in my username. She would call, back in the day, 1-800 IBM-SERV, and you leave off the last E for elephant feces. I don't know. IBM SERV. She'd dial 1-800 IBM-SERV, and she'd get an operator, and she would normally say, "Hi, would you kindly beep Jack K, branch 284, territory 11, 1KC," whatever the numbers were, something like that. I don't remember exactly. And have him call home. And they'd say, "Just a moment, please." And they'd go and send out the message and that. My dad would get the message, and when he'd get to a phone, he would call, and my mother would just bullshit with him for a half hour or so. It was a Friday night. Okay, not like a lot was going on. The boss had gone home for the day already, so it was no big deal. All right. Anyways, this time she called and said, "Would you kindly beep Jack K and have him come home?" Those words have stuck with me ever since, because that was not what my mother normally said, and that was absolutely nerve-wracking, on top of what's going on with Grandma. We had to wait. It was going to take my dad a good 45 minutes to get home, and my mother had to get to the hospital to see what was going on with her mother, my grandmother. So she called the neighbor across the street, whose name was Martha. And Martha was, I'll tell you, this was the neighbors you wanted to have. The sweetest old lady, and her husband, when he was still alive, his name, ironically, was George. Even more ironically, we lived on Washington Street. So you had George and Martha on Washington. So that was awesome. They were the sweetest old people in the world. Let me tell you, oh, just the nicest neighbors you could ever imagine. There's other stories of Martha and that. But anyways, she said, Martha, I need to ask you a huge favor. My mother went to the hospital. Can you watch the kids? She said, bring them right over. And Martha sat us down, and I think she made popcorn for us. And she called up her grandkids, had them come over so we'd have somebody to associate with. And I remember my dad came to the hospital with my mother or something. And then he finally picked us up from Martha's house at like 11 p.m. that night. I still remember all of that to this day. Now, again, I don't know what happened with my grandmother. I don't know if she had bypass surgery or a pacemaker put in. She had all of that done. I just don't know when any of it was done, if it was that time or not. But it was definitely a heart condition that had caused her to pass out. What do you... Really? Don't you care about Grandma? Oh, you never knew her? Oh. Anyways, it was definitely due to that. And I just remember the whole sequence of events. Oh, man, that was really odd. That was really odd. But Grandma recovered. And there she was, back in action. Within another, week or two, she'd take the train out every Friday from Brighton Beach and take care of my sister and I. And the tradition lived on until we were old enough. We were teenagers and we just needed and as my grandmother would put it, an adult present and that kind of thing. That was really it. But it was just the course of events, and have him come home. Ooh, that really, still to this day. So on the, I guess, 4th anniversary thereabouts of my grandmother's passing, I have finally told that old war story. So I thank you very kindly for watching. Make sure you click like, make sure you click subscribe, and take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.